talking about our employees, when we're talking about an intervention, you know, just sitting down and talking with them, pulling them in a conference room out of the, you know, maybe not do it on the floor, which may be, you know, kind of embarrassing, but pulling them into a room, just saying, you know, I've observed this, or you seem kind of down today, or you seem kind of distracted. Anything I can help you with? Again, offer to keep the conversation confidential, and you're going to do that obviously unless there is something that you feel that management needs to know in terms of a threatening nature that's uttered. When you do these things, always make sure that you're protecting yourself. Obviously, we want to be empathetic to people, and we want to show concern, but we need to use best practices. So, you know, maybe when you're meeting in a conference room, you make sure that you're closest to the door. You need to make sure that that door is not locked, because if something should happen and something erupt in the course of that conversation, you want to make sure that you can get out and somebody can get in to get you. Again, just some good practices to think about. You need to have a policy. If you don't already have a policy in your employee handbooks, you need to have a policy that talks about workplace violence, and you need to set a standard of establish a zero-tolerance policy. You know, we will not tolerate violence in or we will not tolerate these type of actions in our workplace. Injuring another person physically, engaging in behavior that creates a reasonable fear of injury in another person. Again, you know, somebody can say, well, I didn't lay a hand on somebody, but they put what we call the fear of God in somebody, and that they felt threatened or feared being threatened, so that, again, emotionally they felt threatened, and we want to say that that's, we have a zero tolerance for that. Bringing a weapon into the workplace. We know under Florida law, if you have a legal permit for a weapon, you can keep it in your car, locked car, but you can't bring it into the workplace, so we need to make sure people understand that. You know, we need to make sure that people understand that you can't damage property intentionally. I had a client one time that told me in a prior life he got so upset one day at work that he kicked down the door to his office. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, his manager pulled him in and talked to him and calmed him down and whatever. And I said, well, you know, in some circumstances you might have been fired because he damaged property, and I'm sure he caused a lot of fear in people. And he was a manager, and he should have known better. But we need to make sure that people understand that will not be tolerated. Threatening to injure an individual or damage property, we will not tolerate. And committing injurious acts motivated or relating to domestic violence, we won't tolerate either. So you need to have a policy that has some kind of language that speaks to those kind of activities. People need to understand that the consequences of their unacceptable behavior is, you know, they might be written up have a write-up in their file, they may be put on probation, they may be put on leave with or without pay, or they may be terminated. You know, and I've had situations where, you know, I've had to terminate people because they threatened another employee bodily harm, and it was unacceptable, and that's what happened. So people need to understand that we have a zero tolerance policy. Here are some things that will not be tolerated in the workplace. If you choose to do these things, this is what will happen. So they need to understand that. If people observe people threatening behavior, whether it's a manager, a supervisor, or a fellow employee, they need to understand that they need to report that. And that person they report that to needs to have a level of trust with the staff, and somebody that is highly regarded, is very well thought of in the organization, is very well thought of and fair-minded, and somebody that is going to treat this information with a high degree of confidentiality. So again, people need to understand, if you see this, you need to report it, and here's the person or the position that you need to report it to. Once that person has received that information, they need to investigate the situation, determine the appropriate outcome, and then act and make sure that is carried out. You know, in many of our organizations, we have annual fire drills. And the alarm goes off, and we all hurry down the stairs, and we are herded to a place if it's in the event of a fire or smoke in the building. And that's good. We should be doing that. But should we not be having a drill that talks about if something violent happened in our workplace, what would we do? You know, if we are in a financial institution, and I'm using this because, you know, sometimes we see a number of holdups in the paper. It's what are we going to tell our employees to do? We need to anticipate these actions so that we can best prepare our employees. You know, when the 9/11 attacks happened on this nation, I remember Rudy Giuliani being interviewed several times, and he talked about all his life. He had been taught that when you confront danger or you confront situations that are unfamiliar to you, go to calm, go to calm, go to calm. That's what had been drummed into him. And so when 9/11 happened, he said he went to that place calm, and what that did was help him to understand what he needed to do next, to get a hold of his common sense, to get a hold of best practices, and then to be able to execute those things in order to protect as many people as he could. So again, when you're thinking about violence in the workplace, if you think through what if this happened, what would I do? Where would people go? What should be next steps? Who would we call? What resources do we need to bring in? Who do we need to make aware? What do we need to do? What are some steps we need to have in place? You need to plan some time, and then you need to have some town hall meetings with your employees. It's not a pleasant conversation to have, undoubtedly, but it's a necessary one just to protect your employees. If you are in a multi-tenant building, maybe you need to get building management to find out, you know, what are they doing in order to help secure your workforce. You know, that person that came in that building in downtown Orlando, the Gateway Center, I used to work in that building. And I remember when I worked there, this is several years ago, you know, as an employee, I didn't have a badge. I didn't have to sign in. I came and went as I wanted. And I remember clients that would come to see me. Again, they didn't have a badge. They didn't have to call us to let us in the building. They came and went freely. So I'm not sure if that has changed in that building. But, you know, if you're in a multi-tenant building, you might want to find out, you know, do we need to have some changes? Do visitors need to be announced? Do visitors need to be escorted? I know there are many buildings downtown where we do have security there in the lobby, and a visitor cannot freely roam the building. So we need to think about those things in our workforces today. Ongoing, again, we need to work with our managers and supervisors on how best to deal with, you know, employees that display non-normal behavior. Give them some training, help them to help the employees. And again, think through the situation. What would you do if? And even to the point where, you know, if something is happening in the workplace, do you have a signal that, you know, paging Mary Wild or paging Susie, whatever, that indicates to people that something is going on, that we need some outside resources, that we need attention. So that is a call to action to say something is happening out of the norm, something has happened that is in a workplace violence kind of situation, and we need some resources. Again, we need to document and report. We need to take appropriate action. And then if some workplace violence does resort or result in our organizations, we need to make sure that we are supporting our victims. And that could be victims of physical injury. That could be victims of emotional injury. We just need to make sure that, you know, we are supporting them as well.